Hi, everyone. So great to see familiar faces. Thank you for coming. And welcome to folks who are joining online. The first thing I want to do is acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam people. Today I have the pleasure of having two esteemed guests. This is Carmen Aguirre. She's an award-winning theater artist and an author, an Electric Company theater corps artist, and the artistic associate of new play development at the Stratford Festival. She has written and co-written over 25 plays, as well as the #1 international best-selling book, Something Fierce, Memoirs of a Revolutionary Daughter, which was the 2012 CBC Canada Reads winner, and its best-selling sequel, Mexican Hooker #1, and my other roles since the Revolution. She is currently developing an adaptation of Euripides' Medea at the Bard on the Beach. She's adapting Molière's The Learned Ladies, commissioned by Factory Theatre in Toronto. She's adapting The Many-Headed Hydra for the Stratford Festival and writing Fire Never Dies, the Tina Modotti project for Electric Company, and a short audio play, Rolling Hills Green Pastures, for Sunny Drake Productions and Why Not Theatre. Carmen has over 80 television, film, and stage acting credits, and over 20 theater directing credits. She is a 2020 Seminovich Prize finalist and a graduate of Studio 58. Let's please give her a hand. And to my left is Stephen Drover. He's a dramaturge and a director who's originally from Newfoundland. He's a 4-time recipient of a Jesse Richardson Award for directing and has been the associate director at Theatre Newfoundland Labrador, the artistic director at Rumble Theatre, and he currently oversees new works and professional engagement at the Arts Club Theatre here in Vancouver, where he develops and dramaturgs new plays. He holds an MFA in directing from the University of British Columbia and an MA in theater and dramaturgy from the University of Ottawa. He will be dramaturging Bard on the Beach's production of Julius Caesar this summer, and dramaturgy projects have included Red Bone Coonhound, it's just been played in Toronto and is currently playing in Montreal, Black Fly, The Cull, Forgiveness and Indian Arm, and he also directed and helped me with my play, The Society for the Destitute presents Titus Buffonius. Please, welcome Stephen. Stephen and Carmen join me today as part of my investigation into the creation of characters for the stage. And I've been using a quote from George Steiner's The Death of Tragedy as my North Star. The quote, "Characters are perhaps those parts of shadow or independent vitality within the psyche, which the poet cannot integrate to their own person. They are cancers of the imagination, insisting on their right to live outside the organism from which they are engendered. But whatever their relationship to the source of invention, dramatic personages assume their own integral being." So under that umbrella, today we're going to look at lived experience versus imagination. First, what do these words mean? According to Oxford Reference, the phrase lived experience means, and I quote, personal knowledge about the world gained through direct first-hand involvement in everyday events, rather than through representations constructed by other people. It may also refer to knowledge of people gained from direct, face-to-face interaction rather than through a technological medium, unquote. Now, today, the phrase lived experience carries a lot of moral weight. It is unarguable. Or is it? Let's say I write a character who talks about how it felt when their father threw them into a river so they could learn to swim. It was my lived experience with my father. But let's say it was also your lived experience with your father. Your experience is yours, and mine is mine. And how we express those experiences we both had could be completely different. Now, what if a poet writes a poem imagining their father tossing them into the river, and they beautifully describe every moment of ecstasy, shock, and cold? It's not even their own lived experience, yet they've captured with words something that I feel more deeply than anything in my own lived experience. I have lived experience in areas that may surprise my friends and colleagues, but my lived experience is no one's business. We are not under any obligation to prove our experience to each other. I use it when the need arises for one of my characters. Now, imagination. According to Oxford reference, the word imagination, quote, is a spectrum of meaning in everyday language, from the experiencing of vivid images in different modalities to states of mind such as daydreaming, characterized by fantasy and fluidity of thought, to the generation of novel ideas and outputs. Though imagination is typically associated with artistic spheres, scientific investigation also involves intuitive leaps in the dark and other hallmarks of imaginative thought, unquote. So, I love to imagine, but I also know that research is part of my imagining. I don't have to be a male explorer in 1845 to write the character of Sir John Franklin. I can imagine being him. I can read into his head and into his life. I don't have to live outside on the streets of downtown Toronto to write a male character who lives on the streets. I can imagine. And I can talk to some of them on Queen Street West. I can imagine being a 10-year-old girl in 2060. I can imagine being a clown, and I can imagine killing someone. But imagination can only take me so far. It cannot take me into race, and perhaps not into gender. There I must research, I must consult. For example, in my play, The Breathing Hole, there are a number of Inuit characters. I'm not Inuit, so I must consult with Inuit people. I cannot understand, so I have to put my trust in their help and also in their language. And even then, with all of that, I'm still placing an Inuit character into a Greek tragic structure. So it's not perfect. Where would we be without lived experience, without facts? Where would we be without truths? And philosophically speaking, there are many, many truths. Where would we be without reality? And where would we be without imagination? Where would we be without the Greek myths from the West, without the indigenous stories from Turtle Island, without all the legends and the fairy tales and the stories from all over the world? But what if we decide only to write what we know, to write only what we live? Some students I taught are adamant that they would never write outside exactly who they are. Never. For example, if they are queer, they will not write a straight character for fear they'll get it wrong. And when I asked the student why, they said, well, straight writers always wrote queer characters wrong, so we're not interested in repeating that with straight people. Now that is admirable, and I do admire it. But is it not limiting? That's what I lay on the table. And I end with a quote from the author, activist, feminist, and educator Bell Hooks, who said, "To be truly visionary, we have to root our imagination in our concrete reality while simultaneously imagining possibilities beyond that reality." End quote. And now I'd like to turn over to my guests. Turn on your microphones and jump in.
Okay.
Leap into the dark, as the scientists would do.
Oh, is it okay with you, Stephen,
Yeah, please.
Wow, thank you very much, Colleen, for all of that. So as you can see, I'm a woman of color, and so my experience walking down the streets of Vancouver as a person that looks like me, I'm going to say is probably very different than a person that looks like you, right? So I'll give you an extreme example.
Your hair is tidier.
My hair is tidier? Oh, good. It's very rare. But I'll give you an extreme example of what I'm referring to. I live downtown, and during the COVID, right, there were the marches that would go right outside my window, right, the anti-vaxxer marches. I don't have a problem with that. And often there would be some Proud Boys as part of the march. And I just noticed that. And twice, once physically and once verbally, I was assaulted after the marches when I was just walking around my neighborhood because of what I look like by Proud Boys. And my son, who was visibly Afro-Latino, after I was assaulted on 2 separate occasions, one physically and once verbally, this is only like a year or 2 ago, I decided to keep him inside the house whenever the marches were happening because of the Proud Boy presence. So why am I saying this? Because I understand the temptation, especially coming from some younger folks, to say, nobody can write a woman that looks like me unless they look like me. Because only a person who looks like me will have that experience, that lived experience. So I understand where they're coming from, but I completely disagree. I believe that anybody can write anything that they want, as long as they do the research. So I believe that I don't believe that you can only write what you know. I believe that you have to know what you write. So make sure that you know what you write. Make sure that you do the proper consultation, the proper research. As opposed to, for example, an extractive way of going about something, right? So let me give you an example. Currently, Stephen and I are in a workshop at Bard on the Beach where I am developing an adaptation of Medea, Euripides' Medea. And I decided, I should go backwards. years ago, when Stephen was the artistic director of Rumble Theatre, he commissioned me to write Medea. And I'm sure he probably thought that I was going to set it in a Latinx neighborhood or with Latinx characters. And I can see why you would think. Yeah. And I actually have set it in Little Saigon at Kingsway and Fraser in 1980, and all the characters are Vietnamese refugees. I am clearly not Vietnamese. So I can see how some people would be like, how dare you? You're not Vietnamese. How dare you write Vietnamese characters? Well, this is why, because I am a refugee. And Medea is the oldest refugee story that has been written, that we know of. So I can come from there. I'm a refugee. I was raised in East Van in the 1970s, and I remember when the Vietnamese boat people arrived in East Van. And I'm doing, from the very, very beginning, what we did is we involved the Vietnamese community in the writing from the very beginning, before I even wrote a draft. So that it's been a collaboration from the start. And even now, this week, the actors, the director, they're all Vietnamese. There is a Vietnamese cultural consultant in the room for the entire workshop, so that it's not me going into the Vietnamese community, extracting stories and extracting experiences and then going, bye-bye. And then off I go and write my play after I've just done this extractive exercise. I've made sure, not by myself, but with everybody that I've collaborated with during the development of the play, that the Vietnamese community is always actually in the room, involved, getting paid. I don't know if I should go on or if you want to jump in. Stephen? Oh, no, I won't get into that yet. I wrote some notes, but I think we'll get there later. Yeah, so when I was saying that I believe that anybody can write anything, I really, really believe that. And, you know, of course, people need to do the research and all of that. Everybody also needs to be held accountable. So when I say anybody can write anything, once it's out in the world, it's in the public realm. And everybody needs to be held accountable for what they have written and what they have put out in the public realm. So that if somebody goes out there and writes a super racist piece, right, against Latina women, they're allowed to do that. Anybody can write anything they want, right? But I, as a Latina woman, do have the right to go, excuse me, what the hell is that? How did you land on that? What are you trying to do here? What kind of research did you do? What is the theme that you are exploring? So my philosophy as well is that nobody is disposable, but everybody is accountable. Okay, let's see. Maybe I'll just stop there for now, because the other things that I want to talk about, I think we'll get to naturally after you've spoken.
Yes, thank you for that, and thank you, Colleen, for that introduction. I would echo both your sentiments. That I'm not a playwright, and two, I'm a white dude. So that, just to position myself in the work. I do think there is something interesting about the premise that you can write whatever you want. No one's going to bust down the door and make you stop writing something. But I do think we do have a responsibility to know what kind of conversations we're inviting with the work. So if I were a playwright, and if I decide to write a play about what it means to be a black woman, I can write that. But I better be prepared for conversations that are going to come, because they will. And also, if I'm allowed to write something, it doesn't mean that anyone has to come see it. It doesn't mean anyone has to fund it. I think you're right, Carmen. There are, would you say, repercussions, or there are consequences of decisions. But I don't think that should stop anybody from exploring creatively, I think. With the Arts Club, I run a playwrights unit of emerging playwrights. And so once a month we get together and look at the work that they're generating. And it occurred to me a while ago that invariably all the work that young playwrights generating that I'm working with are to some degree autobiographical. So I'm seeing the content that they're writing, I'm seeing parallels between that and their lived experience, almost universally. So very rarely am I seeing a playwright write from a perspective that's actively outside their own lived experience. So when I notice that, I go, okay, so what's that about? And is that what's happening, or is that what I'm noticing? There was an essay written in 1946 called what was it called? By two dudes, Beardsley and Walnut, The Intentional Fallacy. And in it they talk about how invoking authorial intent is the least sophisticated tactic in literary criticism. So assuming that you understand what the writer wants as a way of understanding what they've written is incredibly unsophisticated, because ultimately we don't know what Shakespeare wanted. So there's no point in saying he wanted us to do this, because we don't know. And even if we did, that doesn't matter. We're still going to interpret the work. So there's something about drawing an equal sign between the creator and the work that's a little bit misleading, because ultimately we don't know. So I'm thinking about doing that in reverse, looking at the work and making judgments about the person, which we also do. So we say Shakespeare was clearly Catholic because look, he put it in the writing, or this person is clearly feels this because they put it in the writing. So what I find myself doing is looking at the writing and then drawing parallels between it and the playwright. And it makes me wonder if autobiography is something that I'm doing to the work rather than something the playwright is doing to the work. You know, am I looking for parallels between the work and the creator because I ultimately want to understand the creator just as much as I want to understand the work? That the playwright is a puzzle just as much as the work is a puzzle. Maybe not, but I do find it fascinating that I feel a certain degree of pleasure when I see, you know, so-and-so has this experience and they've written this. Oh, I can see that. I understand both the person and the work a bit better when I draw that equal sign. I don't know if that's a tendency that I'm putting on the work or if it's already there. Mm-hmm. But I think that there's a phenomenon about being interested in the lived experience of the playwright while we engage with what they've written.
But why should we be?
Interested in...
Why should we give a shit about the playwright? We don't do that with Shakespeare. I mean, we speculate, but it's not like we look at all those incredible plays and try to figure out who the guy is. I mean, I think, you know, you may be projecting a little bit, but at the same time, you're so right. There is a great deal of autobiography being written by younger playwrights, which is terrific. You know, but my question, I often wonder, do they feel that that is the only thing? That they actually must stay in their lane?
I don't know. I had this debate a while ago during a course during a recent master's degree I did, where we encountered Anita Majumdar's Fish Eyes, and it was presented to us as a piece of autobiography, as if that was a genre of drama. And so we get into it and we look at, because Anita's a brown writer and she was a classically trained dancer, and in the play there's a young brown girl who's a classically trained dancer. So it was presented as autobiography. But when I talked to Anita, she goes, no, there's very little of me in that. Those things just happen to be true. Like, you know, I do think ultimately the cornerstone of our art is that you can understand what it's like to be another human being. That's what acting is, you know, and to say that you can only do you is misguided. But I do think we look for parallels because I think secretly we find it satisfying, and I do think we are interested in biography of the creator, whether that's a contemporary one or a classical one, and whether we admit it or not.
Okay.
I don't think I have much to add other than, yeah. I think that it also has to do with identity politics, right? This whole phenomenon that we find ourselves in, right? Where if I'm going to write a queer character and I'm not queer, like you said earlier, Stephen, I'm going to have to be prepared to have a lot of conversations afterwards, right? I'm going to have to be prepared to have a lot of stuff come at me afterwards and be able to back up my argument of why I wrote a queer character if I'm not queer. And I don't know if that's a bad thing or anything. I'm not saying it's good or bad. It's, but I think that because we're in this moment of what I would call like not even identity politics anymore, but of identitarianism, I think it's connected to that, right? This whole thing of only write what you know, stay in your lane. What is your lived experience? And the trap, another trap about that is that I have also heard people say, oh, well, I have no story to tell because I have a very boring life. And I'm just like this like boring old white guy with no interesting things that have happened in my life, so I guess I shouldn't write, which is terrible.
Oh, well, yeah.
I think.
But is that coming? Yeah. How much of that is fear? Like you talked about how your students were, I think you said they were afraid to write outside of their own lived experience. They're afraid to engage their imagination to a degree that's, I don't know, broke some barrier. Like how much is fear preventing us from creating artwork?
I think we live in a time we're very fearful about what other people will say about what we say. No matter what we say, it's going to be everywhere, and it's a free-for-all. And I think part of it is fear. We have to protect ourselves from that. I also see it as, I mean, that's what I believe the engagement could be, like you say. I think in the theater, we can bear the consequences of what we say. We're in the business of creating messy human behavior. We don't go to a play to see some perfect drama of perfect lives being lived. That's so boring. That's boring theater, and that's a sin in itself. We go to see characters struggling with something, trying to go towards what they believe is right. And there may be two people trying to do the right thing, and both of them are, failing, but they're struggling. They're flawed. And that's kind of beautiful to watch, because no matter who we are, we start to identify with these people. At least we identify with their struggle and the human heart within the character. So I think that we are a little bit afraid. But I don't think we should be, as you say. I think we just have to keep creating, because that is the part of the conversation, even if it's people being upset. Mm-hmm. People being upset is not a problem. It's a valid reaction. I could be very upset at something I read or see, and I think that's terrific. And, I have opinions about it, and I have this, and I have that. But imagine going to see something, and you come home, and you're, bored dead. Yeah. So I do think it's a conversation, and I think the more we have it, weirdly, the less fearful, maybe, younger people might feel. But what do I know?
No, I think there's what happens is that there's a line between there's a line that we cross from that upset me to you shouldn't have said that. Mm-hmm. I was involved. I did a show a while ago where after the fact, when it was all done, I caught wind of a patron who disliked it so much, complained to the company and said, "You shouldn't have done that play." Like not only did they not enjoy themselves, but they admonished us for making the decision to even do it. Mm-hmm. And those are two different things, and I think we kind of blend them together a little bit,
Yeah, but who are you to say, right? You can say that, the patron has absolute right to say that. But you don't have to listen. You don't have to agree. The theater doesn't have to agree. I suspect the theater would agree.
I think going back to writing boring plays.
And she points to me.
No.
Okay.
and no, I'm being afraid of controversy, basically, right? My fear is that we're going to be seeing and reading plays that are morality plays, where there is no gray area. right? Where it's almost like message plays.
Like they're teaching lessons? Like
Yeah. Yeah, preachy plays.
The moral
yeah.
of the story is...
Yeah,
is
and,
right.
and you know, like we're all, I'm sure we've all come across, you know, we're all on juries, we're all reading a lot of stuff that's being put out there, and that's certainly something that that's certainly something that I've noticed is preachiness, right, in the writing that's being put out there, and black and white. You know, and you know, the good characters making the right choices and the bad characters making the wrong choices, as opposed to, no, these are all just human beings. And the most interesting plays are the ones where they're all making really bad choices. And then how do they resolve them or not, you know? So, yeah, I think we find ourselves in the middle of some kind of a cultural revolution. And there's so much fear that you've referred to a couple of times. And how do we get out of it? And I think you have hit on something about the imagination versus lived reality, right? Lived experience? I forgot what it was called. Yeah. Yeah, I think unpacking that will kind of help us somehow.
I wonder if quality has anything to do with it. Like, I remember there was a book years ago called She's Come Undone by Wally Lamb. And I remember at the time people were like astonished that how well he wrote this young girl. Like it felt like it was written by a young girl, and this older guy wrote this young girl, and you know, it was so good nobody had any problem with the fact that he was writing it. Yeah. So there's a quality thing. It's so good we give it a pass. Like, is that where we are? Like, if it just needs to be good enough that nobody cares?
No, I don't think we are there yet.
No.
I think that no matter how good it is, it's like the identity of the writer does not fit these characters. So no, I think that's where we're at.
I think we could be there again in the future.
How can you talk a little bit about? I'm interviewing you here now. The breathing hole and what kind of conversations you found yourself involved in.
I think in an earlier presentation here, I spoke about how for me, it's very, very important that the first thing I do is construct the drama. That's my job as a playwright. I always construct the drama first. Then I do the research. And so I did get into a bit of trouble because that's how I work. And then when we went up north, I was told, well, I shouldn't do that. I should first ask permission. But anyway, that's the way I write. Anyway, it was a great visit because it opened up all kinds of consultations to the point where we were able to work with elders who had ancient language that we could use when we translated it. Elders who came to rehearsals at the National Arts Center, who flew down from Joe Haven. The consult became so exquisitely intimate to make the Inuit characters in the play as authentic as possible. Even though, as I said in this, the construct of the play was a Greek tragic form, but those characters could live their culture specifically within that. But, that was 10 years. That's 10 years of my life. Happy to do it because I wanted to, because I fell in love with the story and with the polar bear. And I would do it all again, in a piece where I could commit everything in order to have this particular part of a story that's not my race, to have it part of this play that I'm writing. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Did it ever occur to you, maybe I'm not the right playwright for this story? Did you ever have that thought when you were creating it?
No, I didn't. I mean, maybe I should have, right? Is that what you... like?
No, I'm not implying that at all, no.
I cannot feel what I cannot feel. I mean, that 500-year-old polar bear, like, fuck, like there's no 500-year-old polar bear. That's an imagination thing. That came from my imagination. And then mixed with, other people's lived experience that they gifted to me and shared with me and worked with me. Like, this was an amazing experience. But it was a real combination of both those elements that we're talking about today. And I cannot absolutely believe it would not be the same play if it was either only one thing or the other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, well, we're supposed to debate this.
We're all in agreement.
We're all in agreement. We're all in agreement.
I think that the one thing we do need to touch on is the question of space and resources. So if there is an equity denied community, let's say it's my community, in the theater, right? And so what am I trying to say? As far as I know, this is true. Yes, it is true, unfortunately. Okay. As far as I know, no regional theater in Canada has ever produced a Latinx work written by a Latinx Canadian woman.
Really?
Yes. So, in a case like that, if you're going to produce a play, right, full of Latinx characters and Latinx women, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, finally, for the first time, on a regional Canadian stage, and you get a white woman to write it, no matter how much consultation, no matter how great the play is, no matter how brilliant, that's not the point right now, right? The question would be, is it the right time?
You answer that question yourself. Answer that question yourself.
Oh, I would say no.
Okay.
Why? Okay, because at the moment, as far as I know, about 3.5% of the population of Canada is Latinx, which is about the same amount as the black population of Canada. And yet, like I said, I'm pretty certain that no regional theater in Canada has produced a play written by a Canadian Latina woman. So shouldn't we be giving, if we're going to do that, let's do it. Like if we're going to tell a Latinx story, why not make sure it's actually written by a Latina woman at this particular juncture, right? I don't know if I'm making any sense.
Yeah, you're saying,
Yeah.
if there's going to be a play, you're going to write it. Not a white, I'm not going to write it. And if I write it, I'm going to get in a lot of shit. Because there's been nothing done. So, you have to pathfind. You have to make the road. And I also agree that we have to share the road. Theater can expand. And I know we have no resources, we're always sort of last on the list, perhaps even after the ballet, but we won't go there. Theater can expand and make even more space, I believe, and, get more money. I don't know if I see that happening, but at least there is a lot of space opening up. But I agree with you. What about you? Should she write that play? Or should I write that play?
I don't know. I guess the question I would then say, if you write that play, should I go see it? Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not just about who writes it, it's about how we receive the work.
Yeah.
The onus is not just on you to do all the work. I have to, choose to... Right? Am I wrong? Or...
Oh, no, I think you're right. I just thought of something.
Yeah, no, go ahead, yeah.
Because it's also about the lens, right?
Yeah.
You can do shit. Let's pretend you're writing a play with a whole bunch of Latinx characters set in a Latinx community, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's still your writing, right? So, and your lens is not a Latinx lens, right? So the play that I write is automatically going to become from a Latinx lens if we're talking about identity, right? So that's the other thing to take into account. What lens do you want it to be from?
Well, that's why we have to share the road.
Yeah.
You can write that play. And you must write that play. Okay, now speaking about plays, we're going to read a play. We're just going to read a tiny first scene of a play in which I'm writing, that I am writing here at Green College. So I thought it's important for me to share just a little bit, and my esteemed colleagues are going to read. Okay, this isn't the greatest play, believe you me.
No, it
We're
is. I read
talking
it.
first draft. This is a play called Growing Up Dead. I can just see a huge commercial success, right? They're lined up around. I want to see Growing Up Dead. Oh, that's going to be a fun one. Anyway, this is about, I've always been interested in climate emergency and imagining, I imagined in the breathing hole the future. And in this, I'm imagining around 2065, looking at a tiny little family who are living sort of outdoors. It's very hot. They're living on the Canadian-American border. And this is, Carmen's going to play Noelle. She's pregnant. She's 32. Stephen is going to play a friend of this little family, Carson. And I'm going to play the little girl, the 10-year-old girl. And there's another character, but he's the father, the husband of Noelle and the father of me. And my name is Ruby. But he's really sick. So he's just laying in the shade, being sick. It's, and the action at the beginning, this is my doll. This is Molly, my doll. And the action at the beginning is that my mother is making a little hat for my doll. She's making the hat from a piece of plastic bottle. It's going to fall off that way. Mom, it's going to come loose because the elastic's stretching. We need string.
This will work, Ruby.
It's got to be tighter on her head.
I had enough trouble making the holes without cracking the plastic. If I pull it too tight, it'll crack for sure. There. How's this look?
It's got to be... Well, I can't see her hat. It's invisible.
Now look. See? It glistens in the sunlight.
Oh, it's beautiful, Mom. Molly, you look so beautiful.
I'm going to get the blankets. You keep an eye on your dad.
Molly, let's play killer attack. I'll be the mother, you be the baby, and I'll be the killer. Oh no, they're coming. Wah, wah. Shh, my dear, dear, dear baby. I see him. Kill him. Boom, boom. No, save us. Someone save us. Wah. Kill the children. Kill them. No, spare us, spare us. Wah, wah. Boom, boom. Kill, kill, kill. Spare us, spare us.
Sounds like you need help.
Oh, killers are chasing us with swords and guns and killer bots.
Swords?
Give me some water.
That's enough for now.
I want more.
I said That's enough for now.
I'm still thirsty. I'm still very, very thirsty.
Where's your mom?
She went to the tree to get the washing. You see? See Molly's new hat? Mom made it out of a plastic cup. It's invisible, but it glistens in the sunlight. See?
Very haute couture.
Eh?
High fashion.
I want to show Molly's hat to Emma. She'll explode with joy. Can I go see her?
Maybe later.
No, not later. I want to see Emma now.
I know you do, Ruby, but your folks aren't going there today.
Emma can come here.
Tell me a joke.
If Emma comes here, Mom can make a hat for her doll. Her doll's name is Hazel.
I don't know if Emma can come here.
She was here before. Ask Emma's dad if she can come play, please.
I'll ask next time I see him. Tell me a joke.
Okay. You asked for it, Buster. You asked to be stumped out of your fucking mind. Why is the number 6 afraid of the number 7?
Why is 6 afraid of 7? I give up.
Because 7, 8, 9. Get it? 7, ATE, 9.
Very funny.
Okay, what instrument does a skeleton play?
Knucklebones.
Nope, a trombone. Why didn't the skeleton go to the dance?
I give up.
She didn't have any body to go with.
You are getting way too smart for me, Ruby.
Look, see? Molly's happy because Emma's coming. Can Emma come, please, Carson?
I'll talk to her dad and see what might be arranged.
Promise.
Promise.
Hey, Carson, good timing.
Mom, Carson, he said he's going to ask Emma's dad if she can come here. Carson, you should see her doll, Hazel. Hazel's hair grows down from the top of her head. She just yanks it out and then, whoa, she gets this hair like down to her bum. And you can make a hat like this for Hazel, and then Emma and me will pretend Molly and Hazel are singers, and we'll make them dance and sing, and we'll be singing in a band. Help me think of a name of a band.
We'll think up names later. It's time for your nap.
No, I got one more joke, and this is going to stump your brain forever.
Ruby.
I got, okay, why does nobody talk in circles?
Because I give up.
Mom?
I give up. Now it's
Because there's no point. Get it? There's no point talking to a circle.
That's very good.
Ruby, time for your nap.
Why do fish live in salt water?
Because Pepper makes them sneeze?
Ah, you guessed.
That's because you told me that one last week and the week before and the week before that.
Ruby, it's time for your nap.
I'm too old for naps.
You need to get out of the sun.
I want to make Molly sing. I love the mountains, I love the rolling hills.
Go lie down, Ruby, now.
Ah, fuck. Fuck.
Don't start swearing at me.
It was Molly swearing, not me.
No, don't play that game.
I'm too old for fucking naps.
Ruby.
That was me talking, because I'm almost 11 years
Then
old.
act your stupid damn age. I'm tired, and I'm tired of your behavior.
Sorry, Mom, sorry.
Apology accepted. Go.
Bye, Carson.
You stumped me good this time, Ruby.
But Mom,
Go.
Dad's breath stinks.
Go.
She goes into the shade beside her father, who's laying down.
It's only been 7 days, Noelle.
I know.
7 days, not 10.
I can count.
Water containers are measured out to last for 10 days.
I know, but we went over.
I'm not supposed to be here today.
Holden's always thirsty.
I'm here in Region 6 on the day I'm supposed to be in Region 7.
His mouth gets so dry he can't
I
talk.
can't keep justifying extra water, Noelle. Everyone's thirsty. Everyone wants
I'm
extra.
not being greedy. It's the cholera. Vibrio cholerae. His heartbeat's irregular. His diarrhea is like rice water.
Okay, I don't need to know the details.
Yeah, you do. He could die.
Mom, I can't sleep because everyone's talking.
Close your eyes, Ruby.
His breath stinks.
Go to sleep. Carson, you have connections. See if you can get some ORS for Holden. Rehydration solution. The glucose and electrolytes will help him.
I'll try to find some. On one condition. It isn't really a condition, it's more like a wish.
I know what you're going to say, so don't bother because the answer is no, not in a million years.
I wasn't going to ask that. I wouldn't insult you.
What's your condition then?
Ruby's your legacy. She may never have kids, but she'll live for a while. To know that after you're gone, after this place turns to a mucky cinder, there'll have been a brief shining moment of beauty, a child singing and telling silly jokes.
I have no idea what you were talking about, Carson.
If Holden doesn't get well, I mean, I hope he does, but if he doesn't, could I be the father to your new baby? I want to help someone who'll be here after I'm gone.
Help how? Teach a child of mine to boss living skeletons around like you do?
No, fair.
Bully people in order to protect private property? What private property, unless you're talking about rich fucks in underground bunkers? Or is it to protect public property?
No, well, that's not what I was...
Public property like this shithole? You've got razor wire and paid criminals to do that. You're an enforcer pretending to be a provider, withholding a cup of water or a handful of beans from a family because the woman, the wife, the mother, the doctor, the activist didn't suck your dick when you demanded them to. That's your legacy, Carson.
First of all, I've never withheld water or beans. Nothing. I give. I share. Okay, sometimes I'm lonely. Sometimes I want love, but I always give to people. I always share. Agree or no?
You were a shithead when you were 15, and you're still a shithead.
That's not an answer.
Fine. Agreed.
Thank you for giving me the chance to leave a tiny bit of my influence behind so that maybe the child can paint pictures and be ready for when art galleries, nice houses, grass, and maybe even flowers return.
Nothing will return, Carson.
You don't know the future, Noelle. No one does.
Mom, I'm starving.
Go to sleep. She's making me crazy, Carson. She's out of control, swearing 1 minute, crying the next, frightened but pretending to be fearless. Next time you come, would you take her to visit Emma and I'll stay with Holden?
That's not possible.
Then bring Emma here for a few days. I know her mother, Liz. She'd be happy for Emma to visit us.
Emma's dead.
What?
I was planning to tell you in 3 days when I came, but since I'm here...
How?
Martyrs.
That's you.
This is me still?
Yeah.
Okay. The last time I took Ruby to visit Emma, Liz and I were both 6 months along. The girls were wild with excitement about each having a baby sister or brother. They were making up crazy baby names, and poor Liz.
I'm sorry, Noelle.
Did she have her baby before Carson, did she have her baby before the Marauders came?
Yeah. Yes. A tiny boy baby.
Was Liz put in a pen?
Those pens are just rumors, Noelle.
No, they aren't. During our visit, Liz told me about a man, a masked man, who was with a group handing out food, but she'd heard he was looking for a pregnant woman. Liz knew a woman who was taken. I've tried not to think about it because being forced to give birth like that is so outrageous. So we have to leave, Carson, now.
Hang on a second.
No, the original plan was to get to Lake Superior, and that's what we're going to do, even if I have to carry Holden the whole way.
No one will come here. No one even knows you're up here except me.
It doesn't matter if they come or not because we're leaving tonight. Ruby?
Stop talking.
If you start walking out there in the open, dragging Holden and Ruby, I can guarantee you won't get far.
We'll go straight north.
North, south, east, west, martyr everywhere. They move in swarms. You're safe here because it's isolated. I'll put up razor wire around, and that'll make you feel even safer. Nothing's going to happen to you, Noelle. I swear on my own heart.
This is not how I envisioned my life. I mean, last year we were surrounded by family, by things we could recognize.
I'll go find some ORS tablets. When Holden gets well, we'll all go up north together and get out of this heat.
Mom, Dad's crying, so Molly and I are going to sing to him, okay?
Yeah, okay. Just do it softly.
I love the mountains, I love the rolling hills, I love the flowers, I love the daffodils, I love the fireside when the lights are low. Boom diddy yada, boom. Mom, Dad's still crying. The end. That's a weird scene. That is a weird scene. There's last thing I want to do, if you give me your patience, is I'd like to read a poem. I want to read a short piece I wrote a while back. It's about my feelings about the US of A. When I was young, those are the feelings when I was young, and also then as I got older. And I'd like to dedicate the reading of it to Daniel Ellsberg, who was famous, or is famous, for leaking the Pentagon Papers and for his activism against nuclear weapons. He's 91, and the other day in the New York Times, I read that he has terminal cancer and 3 to 6 months to live. And this poem is called Crush 1 and Crush 2. Okay, Crush 1. I peek over my border and see you lying across half a continent, your muscular body stretching over 3 time zones, gunmetal gray eyes, so cute in that snazzy Cold War business suit, a He-Man, a hero, and I fall for you like a ton of bricks. My American history book is thick with war, a war of independence, 1 civil, 2 worlds, and an A-bomb, a Marshall Plan, a boo-boo in Vietnam, and fingers up the Middle East. Feel for it, baby. At night I hear your voice on the radio, and I masturbate while a DJ screams, Chicago. And then I discover secrets everyone knows. JFK had jumpy sex glands. Malay civilians were butchered for fun. Teddy K let her drown. Oops. My hero's flawed, like a guy in a Greek tragedy. Selfish, narcissistic, but trying hard not to be. And your struggle makes me love you even more. Please come and visit Canada. Bring your breathtaking optimism, your rifles, your shimmering lures. Fish my lakes, hunt, kill what you want. Don't listen to my dad curse you out when he stumbles on a dead moose on the side of Highway 17 with its rack cut off, meat left to rot. Oh, you're cruel, but your beautiful brutality makes me hot. You can tear off my tusks anytime. I beg you to come up and stay overnight. And you say you might, but you never do, so I go down to you, to New York, a streak of yellow and brown, taxis, abstract art. I gobble up your vital parts, pieces of brain and heart, Ginsberg, Tennessee Williams, Dickinson, chemical gods, NASA, Sondheim, Faulkner, and Eugene O'Neill. I open myself up like a dirty magazine. You show me how to kill someone using only a nail file, how to shoot up, how to fist fuck. You teach me to stand in line outside clubs so a bouncer bigger than a truck can yell, use nothing but dirt. And I lick humiliation from his fingers like a thirsty pup, because I'm learning to shit down and suck up America. I'm learning your game, America. Instant fame, America. Put a green card in my Valentine. Be mine. But I'm another country, a natural resource. Put your hand inside my oil wells. Slide it along my movie screens. Paint me red, white, and blue. You're itchy to buy up the world. Buy me up too. It's true, baby, but it's not true love for you. It's manifest destiny. It's give me more, more, more. But all I have left is a stained white sheet and a red maple leaf and an open sore. And at the Port Authority, I beg for bus fare back to Canada. I tattoo your flag on my thigh and I cry. And that was long ago when we were young, hungry, brilliant. Crush 2. Today I don't recognize your face on TV. What'd you do? Mess up your hair? Break your teeth? Where's my artist, my teacher, my stud? You look like a goon in that conservative suit, hiding behind militiamen and terror traps, eyes flashing with the arrogance of the ignorant. The smell of moral righteousness leaking out from under your borders, stinking of decay as you smile the smile of easy victory. Your forked tongue, your freedom with a capital F. Freedom for who? For me? Or just for you? I watch you winking at the cameras, standing under electric stars while the starving starve and women lose their rights and children cry help in some foreign language you can't comprehend until it's explained on CNN, and then clutching the microphone with your spiky reptilian voice full of pity and regret, you whimper, America. But be careful where you park your F-16s. Your Roman Empire dreams, your weapon of mass communications, because it's my world too. So fuck you. Freedom cuts both ways, asshole. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? This is your old girlfriend at the border screaming through the barbed wire fence you built around your heart. You took my passport and my photo ID. But all the Holocaust museums in Washington, D.C. can't silence me because you're flirting with fascism everyone agrees to call democracy. And I see through you, baby. You're on an X-ray slab, and your cancer shadows are showing, spreading, heading my way, devastating everything you grab. So be careful what you steal, because your nation's zeal is squeezed between the pages of my American history book. Men with vision, men with constitutions, men with basements full of slaves, wild, benevolent dead men, quoted by rednecks, quoted by racists, by oilmen who prop you up on top of the hill, America. The Christians who hand you a throne and a crown, America. But no one will prop you up when you hit the wrong button and fall down, shattering your spine in 1,000 places like Godzilla, like King Kong, lying in pieces on the White House lawn. But hey, I'm a sucker for old boyfriends, cutie. I'll come to your rescue with a mouthful of oxygen and a pint of blood. Because everything I ever loved about you, I will always love. You're my old U.S. friend. And even though it's over between us, our romance never ends, but churns and glistens like the dangerous summer we could not stop kissing. Well, let's open the floor and let's talk about imagination and lived experience and what you've... Oh,
Okay, I'll start. Thank you, all of you, and a poem, Colleen. Cuts so hard, of course, doesn't it? Timothy Finley once said, and I quoted it at the beginning of my biography of Tiff, imagination can save us, and it can save the whole world. And I chose that line as an epigraph because I believe it too. With imagination, we have a capacity to empathize with others who are not ourselves. And nothing does that better in my mind, than the stage. A really good novel will do it as well, or a really good short story, but there's something extra that comes with live performance on the stage. And it hurts me deeply to acknowledge and agree with you that we are being silenced. You are being silenced. And that's the moment we're in, when you cannot imagine another human being's lived experience and to a degree empathize. And I'm not going to go into a rant about the word empathize because it's a complex thing. It can become self-indulgent, and that's not what I intend. So thank you, and thank you for the imagination you put on the stage. And on the page, Colleen. Oh my goodness, but I emailed you about that. And Carmen, Imagination. It's what we need. If we can't imagine the North, then living down here where we do in the South, then we can't understand why it might be necessary to do this or that through politicians or through funding or through whatever, healthcare, clean water, clean drinking water. Coming back to your play. So thank you very much. Keep on with the imagination. It's critically needed right now.
So thank you for that discussion. You've been talking a lot about how or how not lived experience can put limits on creating certain pieces of writing. I wanted to ask a slightly different question. To what extent do you think the nature of the subject or the form of art can put a limit on what you actually can produce? So these days there is a lot of discussion which jokes are comedians or other people even allowed to make about which subjects. But just to spark some controversy, let me drive this to the extreme and ask you, when it comes to the Holocaust, would you rather write a comedy along the lines of Life is Beautiful, or a tragedy along the lines of Schindler's List?
A comedy, always. Yeah. I was on a panel a while ago. It was at the Turkish Film Festival. And I think somebody asked a similar question. And I think I don't remember how they started the question, but I remember the ending of the question. And the ending of the question is, can you write a joke about child rape? And so the other people on the panel were like, no, you can never write a joke about child rape. And then I went, yes, you can. I'm a survivor of child rape, and I've written jokes about child rape, right? So am I saying that you can only write jokes about child rape if you are a survivor of child rape? No. But I certainly can. Like if anybody were to come at me, I'd be like, sorry, but I actually do know what I'm talking about here. But yeah, and also, so about the Holocaust, I mean, clearly I'm not a survivor of the Holocaust, but I'm more interested in somebody tackling a comedy about that than a tragedy about it, because I would be like, oh, they've really thrown down the gauntlet. I want to. Is that how you say it? Yeah, I want to know. I want to know what they do. Like, I'm interested in how they go about this. Yeah.
Well, I would write a tragedy.
Would you?
Because I've been to Auschwitz, so I would probably write a tragedy. But as you know my writing, there's always some jokes. There's always some humor. But that's where I'd go, because I always go to that place. I think I default there. Not that I see the world as a tragic place, not at all. I see it as an amazing place, full of everything. But that's my default. So I would write a tragedy.
Yes. Oh, shit. And yes, and I would also clarify that when I say comedy, there's a lot of tragedy in comedy, just like what you're saying in tragedy. There's a lot of comedy. I would also say the other way around.
And what would you write?
I would definitely not write a tragedy in the strict sense of it, because if you just look at what happened in the Holocaust, your tragedy will always fall short of reality. It will always downplay the issue. And also, like a tragedy, if you take it at least in its original sense of the word, the characters in a tragedy, they always have a certain space for action. And saying that people in the concentration camps really had a space for action that was meaningful, for me would just be completely downplaying the horror of that.
I totally take your point. I mean, I would still do a tragedy, but I agree with you that one could never get at no tragedy that you could write about the Holocaust could ever get at it. Which is, I think, your point. Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Can I throw something else into the mix here on tragedy and comedy? I understand comedy to be something that ends with not a happy ending, but with some sense of resolution and inspiration. Right? I recently saw the film for the Jewish Film Festival called The Lost Transport. And it's about the third train that the Nazis wanted to get the Jews out of that camp outside Amsterdam. They wanted to get them over to Auschwitz. Or was it Bergen-Belsen? Hardly matters. And the first two make it, and the third one is too late because the Germans are about to capitulate and the Russians have arrived in what is the eastern area that has been occupied. Anyway, it ends up with one Jewish Dutch woman who speaks only Dutch and some Hebrew, a German girl who speaks only German in the Nazi town in the countryside where this train is abandoned, and a Russian sniper who's a woman. They have no common language, but they act through their faces and their gestures and what they do. It's quite remarkable. And it ends with an uplifting message. Many uplifting messages. That's comedy. But it's a comedy derived from tragedy that could have been even more endlessly bleak. The Lost Transport. I can't recommend it highly enough.
Thank
You're
you.
nodding, Carmen. Have you seen it?
No,
No.
but it sounds amazing. Yeah.
All right. Well, there's another question.
Here's a thought. Comedy, tragedy, and all the rest of it. Stephen, it was, I think, who mentioned Shakespeare, and whether we should care at all for his intentions. Shakespeare used to be a really big thing. Still is, up to a point. We still have the Bard on the Beach. Though I think enrollments in Shakespeare classes at UBC are declining quite notably because, well, we're not investing. Well, and I mean that's clearly part of the issue. But there's something bigger going on, isn't there, in regard to these, these big imaginative constructs. If the tendency now is for a great deal of production in literary arts of one genre or another to approximate autobiography or memoir, we're ending up potentially with as many stories as there are people to tell them, and nobody is dreaming any longer of the great Canadian novel, the next great American novel, the encompassing plenary text, imagining in all its variety the human condition, for this readership. I mean, Shakespeare was handy because Shakespeare, it could be supposed, did that for, all of us, because Shakespeare was myriad-minded, and as Harold Bloom would have it, even invented, or was it reinvented, the human. And before you had Shakespeare, you had, Dante's Commedia, the encompassing myth of the human condition. We talk about a morality play. We had a morality play which a certain we, had all that stuff, and it was taken care of. Carmen spoke of a cultural revolution. I mean, it seems to me one way of looking at what's happened in the West, which is all I really know about from the inside, is that we actually gradually, and then very quickly, discovered cultural difference. The intentional fallacy and the affective fallacy were two articles designed to ensure that we could maintain a plenary text beyond any quirks of individual personality, whether they were authorial or readerly. The affective fallacy, I think if I remember right, was the mistake of thinking this text means what you feel it means. So on both sides, The imaginative text, be it Shakespeare, Dante, some combination of guys like that, was being helpfully sealed off from any interference, either from authorial intention or readerly response, so that it could be there, quasi-transcendent, taking care of all of us. But we knew by the mid-1940s when those articles were published, or people very like us already sensed, this massive cultural monolith was actually not going to hold out forever. Because by the middle of the 20th century, people actually were discovering cultural difference. There'd been hints of it before. Johann Gottfried Herder had explained there was such a thing, but it could be actually sort of held off by various exercises of, yes, the romantic imagination, then the modernist imagination. But then what do you know? At a certain point, when was it? Some of us were around. Was it in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s? All of this stuff really comes apart. And we discover by now that there are
McDonald's.
Well, yeah, I mean, we can find symptoms of this process anywhere, but I mean, the revolution has gone into overdrive. There are indeed as many cultures as there are individual personal identities. And so no, we're not going to have these mythic structures that contain and hold it all together anymore. We don't actually believe anymore in the human condition. That notion has been thoroughly deconstructed from several different angles. So it's kind of a wonder that we get any large-scale, ambitious works of the imagination in any medium or genre. And if some of our playwrights, directors, and others are nonetheless managing to put on, plays that encompass more than their own individual felt and lived experience, there is something pretty remarkable about that. But I do think this formula of a cultural revolution is probably effectively describing something almost too big to be seen, though we're all feeling the effects on a daily basis. Something absolutely cataclysmic has happened to our sense of belonging over the last 100 years, and here we are. Maybe all we have now are morality plays. Maybe we get to live that experience again, except it's nothing like the experience of being in an audience for a morality play in Europe in the late Middle Ages. Whatever these moralities are, it is a completely different world we're in now. It's kind of shattering if you grew up with some lingering investments in those previous dispensations, which work quite well, variously modified and recustomized for quite a long time.
And they're still being recustomized, I think.
Well,
I think
and maybe that's how you're able to do some of the work that you do.
Yeah, and I think to propose that old structures will go away, I don't think they ever will. I think it's misguided to say when it comes to what we call old masters like Shakespeare and the Greeks, like let's dispense with them and let's look at new things because those things make our way into our consciousness. Carmen's working on a new adaptation of Medea right now, so she's harnessing a great deal of universal knowledge when it comes to an ancient narrative, but through a variety of lenses. So maybe the question is not what's new, is how do we make the old new? Do you know what I mean? How do we inherit narrative? How do we continue the ongoing work that will never end? A great piece of artwork is never finished, it's just abandoned. And we'll continue that dialogue through a variety of lenses and identities, and it'll sustain itself. So we commune with the past while moving to the future. Does that make sense?
Well, the fact that you're talking that way and that Colleen is using George Steiner still as a touchstone suggests that is in fact what is happening in these cases.
There are great works being done. When did Emily MacDonald write Good Morning, Desmona?
Good Night, Desmona.
When did she write
It was in the late 80s, I believe. Yeah.
I mean, there's an example, right? An early example. Sorry, I keep forgetting. Talking about Anne-Marie MacDonald's play. When did she? Do you remember when she?
It was the late 80s.
Late 80s. And let me get the title right. Help me here. It's
Good Night, Desdemona. Good Morning,
Good Night,
Juliet.
Desdemona. Good Morning, Juliet. And it was certainly one of the first plays I can remember that turned Shakespeare upside down. And it was quite thrilling it didn't bother me in the least that Romeo and Juliet had been turned inside out and upside down, and I've never been happy about what happened to Desdemona, but that's another story. But there you have an example, right here, at Homegrown, of a brilliant play.
A very minor work, but yeah,
Yeah.
successful.
Yeah.
I mean, the reality is we drag our past with us. We carry it. The past and everything we know and everything we've read. And you're right. And we are constantly, at least as playwrights, messing around with that. Because you've got to look into the future. And there is nothing but the present and the future. But we are still taking the past with us. And what we do with those three time zones, as it were, to create, moves the thing forward, I think, or at least I hope. Imagination. And on that note, I have to say, I always have to read, because I'm a nervous being. First of all, I wish to thank Carmen and Stephen for taking time out of their busy schedules to come here today, because they are working on a play, and to share their knowledge and experience with us. Since this is my final presentation, I wish to extend my deepest thanks to Mark Vesey, who invited me here to be writer in residence at Green College. Mark, I hope I've lived up to your expectations and I haven't embarrassed you too much, as I am the last writer in residence under your tenure. You're a fine person and you're quite a bit of fun, and I wish you well in your future endeavors. I also want to thank Heather, Alan, Winnie, and the office staff here, kitchen staff, cleaning staff. My thanks to all of the students who tolerate me at dinner time and who inspire me with their bright minds and their kind hearts. So thank you very much.
Just to be clear about this, the invitation was extended on behalf of Green College as a result of the wise judgment of a group of resident members of the college a few years ago. None of these invitations are in the gift of any principal at Green College, and may they never be. No, I deferred in that case to the considered views of a group of, goodness, 8 or 10 greenies. Some 2 or 3 years ago now, before the pandemic. Yes, we selected 3 or 4 people we'd like to have over as soon as possible. One of them wasn't able to come because she got a job that has made it impossible so far for her to spare the time. But you were one of those 3 or 4, and we're delighted that you could join us and spend pretty much a full term here as writer in residence at Green College, both for what you have brought in your own right as an extraordinary creator, conversationalist, and performer, and of course for the company that you have brought with us, this being the 3rd of the events that you've hosted in company, and every one of them, some of you have seen the whole series, has been a real barnstormer. Great to have Carmen back on this occasion, because you were here hosted by an earlier writer in residence a few years ago. I think Alison Waring.
That's right. Oh my God. You have a good memory.
You part of her show. I don't know, Stephen, how often you've trod these boards.
Not at all.
If it's the first time, then that's yet another thing that Colleen has done for Green College that we're very, very grateful for all of that. For this conversation that you've started and which we can now continue across the way. Many, many, many thanks. And Colleen made this new play, find a production in due course, and with the other play that you've mentioned a couple of times in this series that we've been on, can we say any more about your plans for the next production of that, or is that still
It'll happen.
It'll happen.
That's what we'll say.
That's going to happen, so keep your eyes out for that. Something else that happened recently was that the Advisory Board of Green College approved the invitation that I was going to duly and officially extend to you to have you become a distinguished visiting fellow of Green College. But I got a bit carried away in conversation the other night in good company and more or less told you it was a done deal. But actually, it's for you to decide when you're ready. You have a cooling off period now, whether you're willing to become a distinguished visiting fellow of Green College, which if you do, will have a huge advantage for the college that you might drop in here from time to time, and it will have the minor advantage for you that if you do so, you can stay in the guest house for 5 nights in each calendar year at no charge. So would you consider that very, very carefully after a couple of drinks?